Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
Hi, I'm Linda.
and welcome back to Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs.
Linda, it's great to have you back on the show.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, it has been. It's probably before I.O. at this point, but, since I.O., and that's only been like 3 months, Google's been gangbusters with announcements and releases and such, and I feel like there's so much to catch up on, but we want to talk very specifically this time about their image model release that just came out. We've had access for a little bit, about a month or two. Just came out, called Imagen 3, or maybe it's Imagen 3. What do you call it?
I call it Imagen, and I'm not sure why I started calling it Imagen, but then one of the Googlers was calling it Imagine, and I was like, okay, I can see why they'd call it Imagine. Because it can create anything you'd imagine, so that makes sense.
And has that been your experience, that it can create anything you imagine?
Well, the new version can. I mean, I've shown you some of the images that I've created over the last couple of months.
And in the video version of this, we will be, I'll be putting up some of these images as we talk, so you can look at some of these fantastic looking images instead of looking at us. And some of them they are truly stunning. Is that what you like the most about Imagen 3?
Well, yeah, I like I've used several of the other image generation apps before, and you know me, I'm cheap, so I won't pay for it. So I use the free version of Playground quite a bit. I used it, for example, to create the illustrations for a children's book that I wrote for my granddaughter. And the images were beautiful, and it was free. But the images you get out of Imagen, they're amazing. They're absolutely incredible. I mean, it's doing a really good job. I mean, we don't have the issue with the extra leg anymore. I don't know how many times I had to generate images to get rid of that extra leg.
No, it's true. The humans that it generates are very human-like, fortunately.
In some cases, they're almost too human-like. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's difficult to see, is this generated or not?
And that's definitely an issue, and I think we'll talk about some of that in a little bit, where we talk about some of the issues of these things in general. But I agree, so it's very photorealistic. It feels like that was kind of the goal with Imagen 3, was to make things photorealistic, and that's kind of one of my issues with it.
Yeah, it's definitely photorealistic.
But they also, as part of this, they released 2 models, not just one. They released Imagen 3 and Imagen 3 Fast. Have you played around much with either of them? What's your experiences with it?
Well, I've played around with 2 extensively, and then I slowly moved over to starting to use 3. And I tested out a little bit with Fast. Fast is definitely fast. It's definitely probably half the time to generate the image. But in my opinion, the image quality wasn't as good. And for my use case, I would rather have the image quality. But again, I am a little biased because like we saw, there is a price difference between the fast version and the full version.
Right.
It was half the price, right?
It's half the price. So Imagen 3 will set you back 4 cents an image, while Imagen 3 Fast is 2 cents an image. It's interesting to note here that Imagen 2 is also 2 cents an image. So for photo generation, for image generation.
Yeah.
So the pricing between 2 and 3 Fast is the same.
Yeah.
And the image quality is dramatically better still.
Oh yeah, it's definitely better.
I mean, 3 Fast it's not as good as 3, but it's still really, really good.
But is it twice as good? Because you're going to think it costs twice as much.
Right. And does that matter?
When I look at my use case for the images, calculating what I expect to return revenue-wise versus what it cost me to generate it, I think that in the long run, paying 4 cents to generate the image is fine by me. And I did ask one of the Googlers, because I was not able to find any information about the copyright on these images, whether or not, because Playground, for example, states that whether or not you're allowed to use them for commercial purposes or not, or if you own the rights to the image itself. And I was told, there's still no documentation on it that I'm aware of, but I was told by the Googler that we have commercial rights to the images that we generate through Imagen.
And that kind of makes sense, because one of their kind of goals in this API is to make it so that developers create software that's meant for ad agencies. I mean, that seems like it's one of the specific goals of theirs, is to be able to, so you can photograph a model or photograph a product and then put it in whatever scene you want to put it in.
Yeah, but it would be nice if it was documented that we do have commercial
It does make sense, and it really should be, yeah, I agree. I just mentioned the API, and I know you've done a lot of work with the API. Why don't you kind of show us a little bit about how you've done that and kind of what it does and how it works?
Well, the code of course, I use Python. Basically, I don't know how it happened that I went to using Python, mainly because they have a Python library for it. And I previously was a .NET developer, and nobody's bothering to create any .NET libraries for any of the AI Studio stuff or anything like that. So it was just natural for me to move over to Python.
And it should be noted, you do this in Python, but it's a REST API. So whatever language people are using...
It is a REST API, which means, and there are, as far as I know, there is a Golang library, there's a Node.js library, there's Python, and there's the REST, which means you can use it with whatever language you can build upon it on your own. I know of at least 3 or 4 people that have created third-party .NET libraries for it. So you can create your own. And of course there's your favorite LangChain. Does LangChain work with Imagen?
Not yet.
Alan, what are you doing these days?
I'm behind.
You need to get to work on this.
I've had some other projects come up recently, which we'll be talking about in a future episode.
Good luck with that, by the way.
Thank you.
So this code is almost exactly the sample code that they give us. I would actually be really surprised if I've made many changes to it at all, other than the fact that I was creating my own system prompt and I was loading that from a file, but I've since stopped using that. Okay. So the code to generate an image is slightly different than to get context back from the Gemini API itself, because we have a few extra things that we don't have with the Gemini API. One is negative prompt, which basically is supposed to work if you say, I don't want to see cows, well, you shouldn't get cows back. Now, I've been testing with this, and I've actually mentioned to the team, I've been trying to convince it not to show people. Even if my prompt says show people, I have no people in my negative prompt, and I would expect not to see people. Because my issue is that all of my prompts are generated by Gemini itself. That's part of my use case for this. So
and that's
Gemini is making my prompts.
And that's an interesting approach, that you've got Gemini creating your prompts that you're then feeding into Imagen. That seems like a really nice use case, actually.
Oh, Gemini is great at creating AI prompts automatically. I have a really impressive system prompt over on Gemini that tells it how to generate image prompts to pass over to Imagen. So it works really well.
So what are some of these other fields?
Aspect ratio is quite interesting. There are 3 aspect ratios. 19:6 would be like a long form image, so it would be for your cell phone almost.
Uh-huh.
And then 4:3 is more sideways, so it's like a rectangular. And then 1:1 is a square.
Uh-huh.
And as far as I know, those are the only 3 aspect ratios that you can use. So you have to then decide, and you can't really decide how big it is. It comes back the size it does, and then you have to resize it yourself. So, and then you can tell it how many images you want to get back. I just go with the first one, and that's just it.
Well,
one of the things,
and part of that is because you're as part of your image generation, you've got it generating a bunch of images. You don't, and while you want to look through them, you don't want to have to say, well, is image 3 better than image 1?
Exactly.
They're all good enough.
My system is automated, and my prompts now, in the beginning when I created this system, I would review each image because sometimes they were incorrect, not appropriate for work, or, well, they weren't good, they weren't what I was looking for. But I've since, in the last month, tuned my prompt to the point where I am confident enough that the first image it gives back will be good enough, so I just let it generate all the way through, and then I review the application after it's completed its processing. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is the seed. Now, it's absolutely amazing that we can supply a seed here, because then you can ensure that if you run the exact same prompt again in a week, you will get the same image back. And I don't understand why we don't have something like that over on Gemini.
It is surprising, especially since, other language model systems do let you set the seed. But, I agree. This is one of the great things. One of the frustrating things for me, though, is if you don't give it a seed and it generates an image, it won't tell you what the seed is.
No.
So it's always in your best, even if you don't care, have it generate a random seed, that's fine, but make it under your control.
Yeah, I've been testing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Which is fine.
I considered having it set as a random and then saving the random seed as part of a JSON file over on the system so that I could identify what the seed was used to generate those images. I just haven't gotten around to adding that feature yet. Because by keeping it to the same seed, it's almost like all of the images I generate are very close to each other in look and feel.
Uh-huh.
Even if it's a different prompt, they all kind of look the same.
Similar.
They look like they're in the same family. And also I have an issue, which I showed you yesterday. I had an issue with an image that I simply could not get to generate any other way. No matter how much I tuned that prompt yesterday, I could not get it away from the image that I was getting, which in my opinion was not safe for work. But we can talk about that.
We'll talk about that in a minute as well, yes.
Now you can also add a watermark, which I haven't tested. And then there are the...
Before we go on to those, the watermark is interesting, and this is something that Google has been pushing a lot. It's not, they call it a watermark, but really what it is it's encoding in it such that you can detect later whether this was generated by Imagen, or more precisely, Imagen can detect later whether it was generated by Imagen.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's good enough that you can chop it up into something as small as a quarter of the image, and it will still be able to detect reliably that this was generated.
Well, I think it's a great idea, but actually I think it's an awesome idea that we could be able to identify images that have been AI generated as opposed to an artist creating them. Because an artist creating an image, an artist taking the time to create an image should be valued much more than a developer like myself spending, a month or so working on a prompt. Granted, I worked really hard on that prompt, but still, I didn't create this image.
We'll talk about the ethics.
I created the prompt to make the image.
We'll talk about the ethics of this in a minute, because I think it's an important stuff. I don't want to skip out on it, but let's talk about it separately, because there are a whole bunch of ethics issues here. So what's up with the last two?
Well, the last two.
Speaking of ethics, actually.
Yeah, the last two are safety level and person generation. I have not touched these two settings since about 4 days after I started playing with Imagen 3. And that is because if you touch them, everything breaks. It basically locks you down so much that you can't generate anything. I mean, I was having issues because, again, I don't create these prompts. Gemini creates the prompts. So some of them was, if there were kids in it, it was kicking it out. If there was a nurse drawing blood, it would kick it out. I don't know why, but apparently a microphone sitting on stage would kick it out. The big issue with this was if it even thinks that you want to generate an image of a professional actor, then it will kick it out. You cannot, it won't even consider generating an image of Celine Dion on stage. It just, nope, I'm not going to do that.
And it's kind of understandable why it would have that restriction in place. Again, going back to the ethics.
But I'm not specifically saying Celine Dion in my prompt. I am saying a person on a red carpet at a movie premiere. It'll kick it out. No, I can't generate famous people.
Yeah,
which it's locked down, and I have talked to the team about it. It is. I understand why it's locked down and not creating pictures of children and nothing of blood, and I understand why it's locked down. It makes sense that it's locked down, but as a developer, it's annoying.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned it won't generate pictures of children. One of the things I noticed is that setting for allow adult, you can set it for allow children, but you need to be specifically permitted to do so.
Yes.
So you need to, have talked to the team. You need to say, yes, I want children in this. Yes, here is how I am going to be using that. They're very, very careful about enabling that feature.
That is the core of the code. That is basically all there is to this. I've got a few exception checking in here for a few random bugs that the team has, but that's pretty much it.
That's pretty simple and pretty straightforward, it seems like.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it's the exact same code that the team has.
So what environment are you running this in? That's always a good question. We'd like to hear what environment people like to use.
Well, I'm on Windows. I'm using PyCharm, professional PyCharm. And I think I should be on Python version 12. Last I checked, it should be running 12.
PyCharm, from within it, you can just run it. So can you show us a sample run?
Now, again, this is the slow version of Imagen. So you'll be able to see how long it really takes for this to run and generate an image. And again, all I asked it is to create an image of a cat, and there, it's back. I mean, that wasn't too long, was it? That was like, what, 5 seconds? That wasn't too long. And because we use the same prompt, I'm still getting back the same, because we use the same seed, I'm getting back the same cat image that you and I generated earlier because we said get a cat.
That's now up on the screen. So that's pretty awesome. So that's the simple programming. One of the things that I find really neat, and I'm kind of looking forward to, we have this in Imagen 2, we don't have it yet in 3, is the ability to have Imagen do editing through programming and prompting. So you can do things like, if you're familiar with Magic Eraser, on their consumer level product, you'll be able to say, hey, this region here, get rid of the foreground image and give me the background image instead. And Imagen 2 will do that. Or you can say things like, you know what, this was demonstrated in the Made by Google event just a few days ago. They had a picture of a person, but the picture was crooked and it was cropped a little bit too tight, and while there's plenty of tools that will straighten things out, it requires an AI system to be able to say, now fill in the outside part of this, expand this image, and that's called outcropping. And usually, you'll do outcropping to fill in both what your foreground image and your background image might have looked like.
I actually have an image where I'd really like to do that. My mother-in-law took a picture of my husband and I when we got married, and she chopped off his head, the top of his head. So I would love to have an image with the top of a wedding picture with the top of Lazarus' head, but
and it's pretty amazing that it can do those things. Not available for 3 yet. I really can't wait until they do it.
It'll be nice once they can. But what I'm dying to see is how you do that programmatically. How do you create the bounding box?
Well, that's what you do.
Section there where you want.
You create a bounding box, and you create a filter layer.
Yeah, you can do that in Pillow with Python. You create bounding boxes inside of an image to post another image.
They don't do it with a bounding box specifically. What you do is you create another image layer, and you basically say the white parts of this image, when you overlay it on the other image, change all the white parts on this filter image.
Yeah,
on this
make
filter
it
layer.
seamless.
In the UI, they basically let you just kind of scribble over or circle an area, and it builds that layer for you. But as a programmer, what we do is we need to create another image, create that filter layer, and just say, apply this filter layer, and here's the filtering that I want it to do.
Yeah, I've tried doing that in Python, and the generation time is ridiculous. I mean, it's so hard when you start adding the filter layers and the masks and stuff. It takes forever for me to generate the images, and I have a gaming PC with an amazing graphics card, and it still takes forever.
Well, and again, all of this is done in the cloud, though, so you don't have to.
Yeah, I know. Which is even. I wonder if they're going to charge us more for doing editing.
For Imagen-2, and again, we can only compare it to other ones. You can do things like upscaling, for example. So take a 2K image and upscale it to 4K. That's actually pretty cheap. That's 0.3 of a cent per image.
Didn't they show in Made by Google that they were upscaling stuff to 8?
Yep.
That'll be impressive.
Other image editing, though, for Imagen-2, they're charging the same rate as for image generation.
So 2 cents.
It's 2 cents an image for every editing operation.
So question. Can you, if they allow this in Imagen-3, can you create an image with the fast version for 2 cents and then upscale it to a full version of Imagen-4?
Sure, but you're going to you'll be keeping mostly the same image. When we talk about image quality between 3 and 3 fast, it's not that one is blurrier. It's that it just,
it's more creative, yeah.
So let's take this point, and I'll show my example. And for me, this is an example of a couple of things. So here I'm using Google Cloud Console's Vision Playground. I wanted to see how well it would reproduce images from a famous artist. So I prompted it with people in a park on a summer day, oil painting style of Georges Seurat. And if you're familiar with Georges Seurat, he's famous for, a style known as pointillism, where he's basically got a bunch of little points of paint. And they create a very distinct kind of image. And this is what it looks like in Imagen-2. And it's pretty good. It's kind of captured the pointillist idea, sort of. The points.
I actually like these images.
Right.
I think this is my type of art, actually.
Right.
So I'm actually a fan of these. I like these, considering the fact that they were done by Imagen-2. I really like them.
They're very nice, and they're very good. They're not quite his style. They're not, you wouldn't confuse these for a real Georges Seurat painting. But they're pretty good.
I mean, that will come to that, but there also comes to the idea of plagiarism, whether or not copying an image by another artist.
We'll get to ethics in a minute. I promise we will get to ethics in a minute. Here's what it looks like with Imagen-3 Fast. And really good, really crisp. It really does, it's a dramatic difference.
Oh, it's a big difference. It's definitely a big difference.
But this feels to me too photorealistic when I've asked for an oil painting. I look at these and I say, you know what? I feel like I might have taken these with my camera and a little bit of editing on my camera.
Yeah, it feels like more like you just put like a paint filter from Photoshop over the top.
And this is what it looks like with Imagen 3 slow. And these are, the quality is a little bit better than 3 fast. To me, it only feels a little bit better. My problem with both 3 and 3 fast, though, is neither of them really look like a Seurat painting. They didn't capture the pointillism, which is kind of, they feel too photorealistic to me.
When I first started playing with Imagen 3, I was trying to get it to do different types, different styles of image like I could over on Playground. Because Playground could do storybook, it could do, like cartoons, it could do logos, it could do all kinds of things. I gave up. I was not able to get Imagen 3 to do anything like that. It's like it's stuck on photorealistic.
And that kind of makes sense. Some of the pictures that we've been showing, we're showing people and they look like people. And that was been one of the biggest criticisms of a lot of the older image generation programs, including Imagen 2, is that when it tried to create people, they looked wrong. These look like people. And I feel like that was kind of the focus on 3 was, let's make sure people look like people. And the side effect of that is that everything else, if you want to do a cartoon, it now looks a little too photorealistic. I feel like that's kind of the side effect of focusing on the photorealism.
Well, as a developer, I question whether or not do they need a different model created to be able to do the different styles of images, or
in theory, as I understand it, they should just be able to train it on all of these other styles.
Yeah, but you're going to do.
But that's a good.
If you train it on every single style, it's going to get really bloated, and I question whether or not it would be a better idea to do, because Playground, you actually have to pick which style you want to generate an image on. So I kind of wonder whether or not they have a model specifically trained to do storybook and one specifically trained to do
I don't think they do. I think that's just what they fed into the prompt.
It could be, because it does look like it brings in a specific type of prompt in.
It's an interesting question. It's an interesting possibility that it wouldn't surprise me if they explored at some point in the future. Then you start, though, getting into issues like, I want a picture of a person in their living room with a Van Gogh style painting on the wall. Well, okay.
Oh yeah.
Now you're mixing two styles, and can you do that with just with 2 prompts? With how do you do that? Or do you have it smart enough that you've got one model that says, okay, fill this in with I don't know, and have another model I don't know.
I have to look through my list of images. There is an image where there is a person doing paint. There's several images there's someone either painting or there's a picture of painting on the wall somewhere.
Interesting.
And they actually look kind of cool. So see if you can find those and put them up on the screen right now.
Okay. So we've been talking now for about 30 minutes. Let's get to the ethics questions. And there are a pile of ethics questions here, starting from should this be allowed at all, to how do we deal with copyright issues, how do we deal with plagiarism issues, how do we deal with, known celebrity issues, how do we deal with people and children and so forth. Lots and lots of issues here.
Well, the first issue I would like to approach would be the fact that, I've shown you a couple of the images that I have gotten that I constitute not safe for work, while the first one, the lady in the dentist office, which you said you were not going to show.
I'm not going to put that up on screen. That's one of the nightmare images, I think. And I think it's inappropriate.
But the thing is, it's inappropriate, but let's be clear. She actually does have clothes on. The amount of clothes she's wearing are a little limited, and the position she has is also a little unacceptable in my opinion. While the image that I showed you yesterday actually has breasts hanging out,
But,
that
okay,
is a whole nother thing. But
So-
is that an issue?
Well, I think it is. I think it's a big issue. So when you showed me that image, and the image is now up on the screen with a little bit of censorship to make sure YouTube doesn't ding me. I noted, you pointed out the problem with the attire, and I said
She looked cold. Let's just say she looked a little cold.
she looked a little cold. I think the way I put it was, it wouldn't surprise me if you went and looked for images, you'd find you'd find real paintings in this style. And then later in the day, you pointed out that your husband Lars said, yeah, there's a painting almost exactly like that.
Well, actually, he said, yeah, but that's how she's supposed to look. And I was like, what do you mean how she's supposed to look? This is generated. Oh, no, he says, that's an actual, this goes to show you the difference between the Danish education system and the American education system. Because it's actually a known image painting from the French Revolution. And I've got 5 or 6 versions of it, probably in my trash can. And some of them are very close.
This one is astoundingly close.
Yeah,
and
it's
close. So you ask, is that an issue? Yes, that's an issue. That's a big issue.
Well, why is it an issue? Is it an issue because she's unclothed? But it's also an issue because it looks so close to an existing painting.
Yes.
So that in lies the question, okay, if I asked for a Van Gogh painting, how close to an existing Van Gogh painting can it be before it counts as plagiarism?
I think that's a good question.
This is what artists are afraid of.
This is definitely what artists are afraid of. And this is what the AI advocates will say, look, if you are, one of the problems we have in detecting art fakes, for example, or not art fakes, but detecting the authenticity of a real Van Gogh is, okay, was this done by Van Gogh, or this is more likely, was this done by Rembrandt, or was this done by one of Rembrandt's students?
There's quite a few issues where that's been an issue where it's been a student that's done it, and he's done it
because
the same
historically,
style.
when we've trained artists, they've been training under an apprenticeship program, and they pick up the style of the master. AI advocates will say AI is exactly the same. We've just trained it on all of these, and I'm like, well, no, there's a difference. In one, when you've got a real artist, an artist who is looking at it, they are both learning techniques from their teacher, but also learning their own techniques. They have their own experiences. They've got their own things that they are injecting into it.
Actually, I think the issue is that an artist, I do paint, and I have been known to paint or try to paint similar images to artists that I like, but I always put my name on it. Why? Because I know the ethics behind it. I would never try to copy an image by somebody else. An AI is not bound by the ethics of a human artist.
Well, it's twofold. One, it's not bound by the ethics. Two, it doesn't necessarily know what to distinguish. The distinguishing differences are. There have been some real examples, and I don't think I've seen this with Imagen, but there have been some real examples where it's been asked to, produce a picture of something, and it looks shockingly similar to the original, down to the signature.
Oh yeah, agreed.
So
but then,
it's not understanding, and I put that in quotes, what it is looking at. It just sees
that's the point.
Patterns.
Yeah.
And that's the
Which
difference.
is phenomenal that this is learning to do this just based upon patterns. It actually has no concept of that is a cop.
I mean, I think that, technologically, I think that's amazing. And I think some of the output that it's producing is amazing. As somebody who is utterly incapable of drawing a straight line, even with a ruler, I find this all very impressive. But I'm very, very concerned with this. And when we start talking about, how much is copying, well, okay, if I said, create something in the style of George Seurat that is a cat typing at a computer, that's fine. That is clearly that is using the style to do something that Seurat did not and could not do. That's fine. in my mind.
In my case, the prompt that I had used was to create a painting of the Revolutionary War in France or something like that. And that was why it popped up, because there actually is a painting based upon the French Revolutionary War that depicts this. And why? Because the prompt that I got out of Gemini was describing the image itself.
Right.
So my issue is basically because of the fact that I used Gemini to create an image about the French Revolutionary War. That's what I got.
Right. This does get back to the fact that our training material, we're relying on training material that does know all of this stuff.
Yeah. So I'm not creating them myself. The prompt, the AI is creating the prompt for another AI, which is what is going to get us into trouble.
If you had changed your prompt to something like, Portrait of the French Revolution in Paris 2024.
It would have gotten...
It would have...
Yeah, maybe some...
It would have been different. And, it would have... That's a case where maybe it would have drawn from some of that styling. You may still have had Lady Liberty being very similar, but with a very different background.
Yeah.
Or very different other characters involved. Or maybe she would be... more dressed like the woman in the dentist chair. I don't know. I think these are real issues, though. And these are real concerns. And you can I very much understand why artists are concerned about this, and they're right.
I didn't put a note in the book that I wrote for my granddaughter that the images were generated, and I actually regret that I did. I actually, I think I did on the second book that I wrote for her. So I think from now on I'm going to be coming clean that these images are not my own.
And that's the appropriate way to, and I think that's what's important about this watermarking effort, for example, as well, is that it's included, it's detectable, and it kind of bothers me that some of the image generation systems don't do that.
Well, another thing is that I do have to worry about is we've already discussed about the fact that we have commercial use to these.
Yes.
Now, when I have spent time generating these images. I've spent time creating them, and Google says that they are mine. But I believe that there was some kind of law created, was it in the United States or was it in Europe, that says that computer-generated images cannot be copyrighted? Which means I cannot claim that, which means that anybody would then be able to use images that I've used.
It wasn't
and I question whether or not that's fair.
It wasn't a law. It was a copyright ruling in the U.S. that computer-generated things, and it was both text and images, were not copyrightable. And I suspect, as we see a number of lawsuits coming out about the inputs, we'll see how that gets ironed out as well. And I don't remember the details of the case right now.
But because again, that comes into what's fair, because when I write my books first, and then I have Gemini, because I'll admit it, I'm dyslexic, and I have issues sometimes in getting the words to work out right. So I have been using Gemini to help me flush out my books to make them more readable. And I don't want to pay for an editor to do it. An editor probably would be able to help me do that, but I don't want to pay for an editor to edit books for my granddaughter. So I use Gemini. Now, is that then my book is no longer copyrighted to me, even though it was my book?
No. I think the big difference, though, is, and I think this is an important distinction, is that once Gemini, or once any language, any model generates something, you're then going and reviewing it. You're not saying, write a book on this subject, and then blindly putting that in the book and printing it. You are going in and reading what it has generated and doing the editing yourself.
But some people are.
Some people.
And how can you tell the difference?
You can't.
Now, if they're saying that
that's
it's not copyrightable, how can we tell the difference?
Well, I think the difference, again, the difference comes back to where the human is in the loop. And we're going to have cases about this for a long time, I am quite sure. And I think that's an issue. It's a question and it's an issue, and it's one that needs to be resolved. Well, we got nice and depressing here. And hopefully
We normally do.
And hopefully I've put in some, nice and depressing images to go along with this discussion. So, end of the day, Linda, are you going to keep using Imagen 3?
Heck yeah. Oh yes, most definitely. I will. It's I know Playground has an API, but I haven't bothered to figure it out, and I like Imagen. It works fine. It works fast. Granted, it's not that much code, so if I ever decide that I want to switch out to a different image generation model, I can. But no, I like Imagen, and I use it daily now for this project that I've been working on.
So, we would love to hear how other people are using image generation. Not just, we would encourage you to use Imagen 3 for this. We'd like to hear your experiences, see your results. Love to have you on and talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I am sure we'll be returning to this theme another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
Thanks, Linda. Talk to you soon.